Pulang saludo, Ka Joma, bayani ng Pilipino, tulad ni Andres Bonifacio at Crisanto Evangelista. Salamat sa pag-aalay ng buhay, talino, tapang at tatag, sa pagsusulong ng revolusyon ng proletaryado at bayan. Pulang saludo, Ka Joma, sa dakila mong gawa. Pulang saludo, Ka Joma, mabuhay ka, mabuhay ka. Pulang saludo, Ka Joma, sa pabrika, bukid, binahan, eskwela, tanggap at sanman, mga akda mo ay liwanag, sa pakikibaka ay sandata, para sa bagong demokrasya, hanggang sosyalismo'y maabot at mapaunlad ng lubos. Pulang saludo, Ka Joma, sa dakila mong gawa. Pulang saludo, Ka Joma, mabuhay ka, mabuhay ka. Magkaisa't itaas ang kamao, mandilang kulay, iwagayway, ang pakikipakan ng sambayanan, isulong at ipagtagumpay. Ang saludo, Ka Joma, tagapag-organisa ng kabataan, mga manggagawa't magsasaka, mandirigmang minamahal, inikot mo mga kapatagan, kabundukan at kagubatan, tinawid mga ilog at dagat, upang ilunsad digmang bayan. Pulang saludo, Ka Joma, sa dakila mong gawa. Pulang saludo, Ka Joma, mabuhay ka, mabuhay ka. Anuman ang hirap at panganib, kumilos ka laban sa kaaway, labis man ang init ng araw, labis man ang lakas ng unos. Kasama ka sa hukbong bayan, sa pagsasanay, pagmatag, pagkampo, pagtugtog at pagsalakay. Pulang saludo, Ka Joma. Pulang saludo, Ka Joma, sa dakila mong gawa. Pulang saludo, Ka Joma, mabuhay ka, mabuhay ka. Magkaisa't itaas ang kamao, kandilang kulay, iwagayway, ang pakikipakan ng sambayanan, isulong at ipagtagumpay. Matatag ang panindigan sa panganib ng kamatayan, sa pagdanas ng pahirap ng mga papet na pasista at mismong mga imperialista. Maningning ang iyong mga halimbawa sa bayat sang daigdigan. Pulang saludo, Ka Joma, sa dakila mong gawa. Pulang saludo, Ka Joma, mabuhay sa iyong paglaban ang mga ambag sa pagsulong ng ating revolusyon sa bayat sandaigdigan. Pulang saludo, Ka Joma, mayaman ang iyong pamana sa mga susunod na salinlahi. Ka Joma, mabuhay kang lagi. Pulang saludo, Ka Joma, sa dakila mong gawa. Pulang saludo, Ka Joma, mabuhay ka, mabuhay ka.
Hello everyone in person and online. Magandang hapon, gabi, o umaga, wherever you may be. Thank you for joining ang Gabay, an event to commemorate and carry on the legacy of Jose Maria Sison. Tonight, we will commemorate the 2nd anniversary of Jose Maria Sison's passing. This commemoration is organized by the JMS Legacy Foundation, or JMS-LF. You will learn more about this foundation later in the program, but to start, JMS-LF is a new initiative that was established to preserve and promote Jose Maria Sison's legacy. In this commemoration, Joma will be highlighted as a guide, torchbearer, beloved warrior, and comrade, and proletarian internationalist. His insight providing clarity of vision and purpose through different rectification movements, upholding the proletarian line of the party, and contributing to the world proletarian revolution. The program is made up of speakers who can share their recollections of Joma, his role in the world proletarian revolution, and how his legacy continues, as well as videos that give more detail on Joma's life and influence. Our program has 3 main parts. The first part tells the story of his life and work, and how these are intertwined with the development of the National Democratic Revolution in the Philippines. The second part is about the appreciation that is shared for Joma's work by people around all the world. In the third part, we have speakers who will introduce the foundation as an initiative to carry on his legacy. To start with, for those newer to Ka Joma, our first video is an overview of Joma's life and legacy. Building on that video, we hope that our program will inspire, motivate, and move you to learn from his life and continue his legacy of lifelong service to the people.
The Philippines is a rich country, but the Filipino people are poor. This is the first line in the book Philippine Society and Revolution, written by Jose Maria Sison when he was just 29 years old. This book served as the foundation of one of the strongest national liberation movements in Asia. Then, and more so today, this book and Sison himself hold profound significance for the Philippine Revolution. Who is Jose Maria Sison? Jose Maria Sison, or Ka Joma, one among thousands of revolutionaries and fighters, was born into a landlord family in Ilocos Norte on February 8, 1939. He studied at the University of the Philippines in Diliman, Quezon City. It was in UP where he first encountered Marxist, Leninist, and Maoist writings, which shaped his standpoint and philosophy and became the foundation of his own work. In his youth, he formed Kabataang Makabayan, or KM, one of the most important youth movements that emerged in the Philippines. Due to the prestige achieved by KM, he was invited to become an official of the old Communist Party. He prepared a political report that revealed and repudiated the revisionism and opportunism of the Lava and Tauruk leadership. He broke away from the old party and led the re-establishment of the Communist Party of the Philippines under the nom de guerre Amado Guerrero on December 26, 1968. He drafted the party's constitution and program for a national democratic revolution and the document Rectify Our Errors, Rebuild the Party. In 1969, he wrote Philippine Society and Revolution, which outlined the history of the Filipino people, analyzed the semi-feudal and semi-colonial character of Philippine society, and gave meaning to the National Democratic Revolution. He drafted the documents of the New People's Army and led the first meeting of Red commanders and fighters to establish the New People's Army on March 29, 1969. He led the party in the early period of its development. He wrote the Organizational Guide and Outline of Reports in 1971 and the Revolutionary Guide to Land Reform in 1972, which guided the work of establishing mass organizations, organs of political power, and units of the People's Army and the party. He wrote the specific characteristics of our People's War in 1974 that laid out the strategy and tactics in mounting the People's War in the Philippines. He authored Our Urgent Tasks in 1975, which contained the report and program of the Central Committee's work. These are the foundational documents of the National Democratic Revolution in the Philippines that each party member and fighter must grasp firmly. Ka Joma and his revolutionary wife, Judy de Lima, were imprisoned in 1977. He was tortured for 9 years in solitary confinement by fascist agents of the state. But his revolutionary spirit prevailed. In cooperation with Ka Julie, they published the article on the mode of production in 1983 that served as a theoretical explanation and clarification on the characteristics of a semi-feudal and semi-colonial system. The article on the losing path of the AFP was released in 1984 to assess the balance of forces and to signal and convince the Pentagon that it was better to let go of Marcos, who was most likely to create divisions within the AFP. Ka Joma was freed from prison after the EDSA uprising that toppled the dictator. He was forced into exile in the Netherlands after the Cory Aquino regime canceled his passport. He later on joined the International Department of the National Democratic Front in Utrecht. Since 1992, Ka Joma masterfully represented the interests of the Filipino people and the revolutionary movement in peace negotiations. When the party launched the Second Great Rectification movement in 1992, Ka Joma was one of its most ardent advocates. In the preparation of the document Reaffirm Our Basic Principles and Rectify Errors, the party leadership consulted with Ka Joma and referred to the documents he wrote on the re-establishment of the party. He also played a key role in writing Stand for Socialism Against Modern Revisionism that shed light on the path of socialist revolution during the dark period of capitalist restoration in the Soviet Union in 1990. While in the Netherlands, his base became a political center of international communist movements and anti-imperialist struggles. Among others, he led the centennial celebration of Mao Zedong's birth in 1993 that upheld Maoism as the third historical period of development of Marxism and Leninism, the formation of the International Conference of Marxist-Leninist Parties and Organizations that served as the center of ideological cooperation and practice among the ranks of communist and workers' parties, the establishment and leadership of the International League of People's Struggles that served as the center of cooperation for anti-imperialist movements across the globe. Within the span of 3 decades, he continued to impart important knowledge on the local crises and situation of the revolutionary forces. He gave advice to the party and the revolutionary forces in the Philippines to resolve issues and advance the revolution to new and higher levels of development. Ka Joma died on December 16, 2022. He is considered by the party as the greatest among Filipino heroes in the past century. No one can deny that throughout Philippine history, nothing can compare to what Ka Joma was able to achieve in arousing the Filipino masses to resist and fight. All national democratic activists, Red fighters, and party cadres began their education and consolidation through his writing Philippine Society and Revolution, the most comprehensive analysis of the history and conditions of the nation. In his passing, he left the party with invaluable treasures of theory on the Philippine Revolution. Let us use and further enrich his legacy through our practice today and in the anticipated advance of the National Democratic Revolution until we achieve socialist revolution. The unending luster of Ka Joma's teachings will serve as our guide in advancing through the arduous path of revolution.
Mabuhay si kasamang Jose Maria Sison! Mabuhay ang Rebolusyong Pilipino!
As you may have noted in the memoir, Ka Joma has dedicated his life towards advancing the world proletarian revolution. His main contribution to this is giving shape to the national democratic movement, which continues to give perspective and hope for a better future for the Filipino people. In the video, it mentions how a young Joma led the re-establishment of the Communist Party of the Philippines, the process of summing up and addressing the weaknesses and errors of the old party, culminating in the re-establishment of the CPP, is also known as the First Great Rectification Movement, or FGRM. It was a period of struggle which laid the foundations for a genuine proletarian movement and the launching of the National Democratic Revolution. To give more detail and color to this period of Ka Joma's life, we welcome our keynote speaker. She is Ka Joma's lifetime partner and comrade in revolutionary love and a long-standing active revolutionary in her own right. We thought that nobody would be more suited to give a keynote than Judy de Lima. Please welcome Ka Julie.
Jose Maria Sison was born the sixth of 7 children to a landlord family in Cabugao, Ilocos Sur on February 8, 1939. Reaching age after World War II, unlike his elder siblings, he began grade school in a public elementary school just across his ancestral home. Here his classmates and friends were children of tenants among the working class poor, from whom he listened to tales of exploitation and oppression from his family. As he matured, he carried these tales with him, which were reinforced by observations of exploitation and oppression among the working class poor in Manila, where he was sent for secondary schooling at the exclusive Catholic school Ateneo de Manila and San Juan de Letran. His first attempt at resolving societal issues was producing the concept note of a movement, the Alliance for Liberation and Socialist Advance, in 1958. We discussed this with close friends who all supported the project. However, just as we were about to proceed with organizing, we chanced upon the writings of Mao Zedong in the private collection of a political science instructor in the university. Joma avidly read and studied Mao's writings and realized we were on the wrong track by aiming to organize the Alliance for Liberation and Socialist Advance, or ALSA, by reading up, studying, and analyzing the political economy of the Philippines. He realized that the country and its people first needed to be freed from feudal and semi-feudal oppression and exploitation before taking on the task of building socialism. Thus, He proceeded in 1959 to organize the Student Cultural Association of the University of the Philippines, or SCAUP, not only to oppose the pro-imperialist reactionaries who dominated the liberal arts faculty and the general run of the UP students in the UP Student Catholic Action, or UPSCA, under the tutelage of the American Jesuit Father Delaney, but also to advocate national liberation and democracy. In SCAUP, we had a two-level educational program for members. One, the openly promoted national democratic courses on a comprehensive range of issues involving the contradiction between the U.S.-dominated ruling system of big compradors and landlords and the national and democratic demands of the people. And second, the discrete Marxist-Leninist Maoist courses on revolutionary theory and practice. SCAUP recruited the brightest and most accomplished students who were already leading other campus organizations, those who could write for and or compete for the editorship of the Philippine Collegian, and those who had high academic marks required to be fielded as candidates for the Student Council. Thus, SCAUP members won the editorship of the Philippine Collegian and transformed its advocacy to anti-imperialism and progressive ideas. Joma and other SCAUP members also published unstable little magazines espousing similar anti-imperialist and progressive ideas. It turned the pro-imperialist tide among the students, and eventually, SCAUP members won the UP Student Council elections, which then became a progressive organizing instrument for schools all over the Philippines. With the resources of the UP Student Council, SCAUP organized conferences, inviting members of student councils and student publications from all over the country, and thus laid the basis for organizing Kabataang Makabayan. SCAUP gained national renown when it gained its first big opportunity to organize in a united front with other campus organizations the mass protest on March 15, 1961, opposing the congressional witch hunt conducted by the Congressional Committee on Anti-Filipino Activities against UP faculty members and students who were accused of writing or publishing Marxist materials in violation of the anti-subversion law, including Joma's Philippine Collegian article, Requiem for Lumumba. This was the first anti-imperialist and anti-feudal mass protest action after a decade of intense reaction since 1950. 5,000 students surged into the Congressional Hall to literally scuttle a hearing of the Committee on Anti-Filipino Activities. As a result of the anti-CAFA mass action, Joma's UP teaching fellowship was terminated, but he gained the time to do further revolutionary student organizing in several universities, albeit clandestinely, and encouraged the formation of progressive student organizations nationwide. In 1962, he joined the trade union movement and the Workers' Party, where he did research and education work. As vice chairman for education of the Workers' Party, he organized seminars for trade unionists from several major labor federations and large independent unions. Then he established the youth department of the Workers' Party, which would become a source for young workers for Kabataang Makabayan. Joma wrote articles on land reform and from early 1963 gave refresher courses to peasant leaders and veteran fighters of the old People's Army, who then recommended their children and their young relatives to become members of KM at the preparatory phase of its founding at the beginning of 1964. The young professionals that had been the first to join KM came from the ranks of teachers and eventually from various professions: health professionals, lawyers, scientists, engineers, artists, cultural workers, and others, who all became progressive while they were students. From 1964 onward, KM became a training school for activists in the National Democratic Movement for the purpose of arousing, organizing, and mobilizing the youth in the schools, factories, farms, communities, and offices. The schools for national democracy were instituted at various levels of the KM and in various spheres of work. The emphasis was on training young cadres for the trade union and peasant movement, and student and young teachers for rapid nationwide expansion. The KM became outstanding in mobilizing the youth in mass protest actions against the unequal treaties with the U.S. in the economic and military fields, against new dictates by the U.S. in every field, against the killing of Filipinos in the U.S. military bases, against the puppetry of the reactionary regime, against the big compradors and landlords, against oppressive and exploitative school authorities, and against the U.S. war of aggression in Vietnam and elsewhere. The KM also became the largest militant youth organization. Its members had a high level of political education and training for the advance of the National Democratic Revolution. Thus, it became a major part of the Workers' Party in 1964, and then its successor, the Socialist Party of the Philippines, in 1966. It also became the major part of the movement for the advancement of nationalism, a National United Front formation in 1966. He became the General Secretary of the Socialist Party of the Philippines and the movement for the advancement of nationalism on the basis of the well-rounded political and organizational strength of the KM. At the core of Kabataang Makabayan were proletarian revolutionary cadres who had become members of the old merger party of the Communist and Socialist Party since 1962, and who from year to year became dissatisfied with the growing current of modern revisionism in the old party. From 1964 onward, the proletarian revolutionaries increased and outnumbered the old members of the old merger party. They demanded the rectification movement to criticize the major errors and shortcomings of the old merger party since the 1930s. Joma drafted a rectification document which the Lava revisionist renegades rejected and opposed and sought to expel the proletarian revolutionaries. The young proletarian revolutionaries and their senior comrades separated from the Lava revisionist renegades in April 1967, intensified the rectification movement, and began preparations for the re-establishment of the Communist Party of the Philippines under the theoretical guidance of Marxism-Leninism Mao Zedong thought on December 26, 1968. There is no higher meaning and mission in a person's life than to serve the people and sacrifice so that they can be freed from injustice, oppression, and exploitation. Joma lived by this tenet. Herein lies his greatness. On the question of how to serve the people, he turned to the study of dialectical and historical materialism from the great revolutionary philosophers and thinkers, Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Mao, and practiced their teachings on the concrete conditions of the Philippines. He proceeded to arouse, organize, and mobilize the great masses of the people, the workers, the peasants, and the middle social strata. By establishing the Student Cultural Association of the University of the Philippines and then later Kabataang Makabayan, Joma laid the foundation of the current revolutionary movement of the Filipino people. In establishing the party, the New People's Army, and later the National Democratic Front, Joma applied dialectical and historical materialism to reveal the fundamental nature of the semi-colonial and semi-feudal system in the Philippines and how to change it. These are detailed in his writings, such as The Program for a People's Democratic Revolution, Philippine Society and Revolution, Specific Characteristics of Our People's War, Guide for Establishing the People's Revolutionary Government, Our Urgent Tasks, and other subsequent writings. Even while in prison, he was able, through visitors, to smuggle out significant writings that helped to guide the course of the revolutionary struggle led by the CPP. He was a staunch Marxist-Leninist Maoist and a persistent revolutionary fighter. The preparations for the reestablishment of the Communist Party of the Philippines, and in the course of the first Great Rectification movement against the Lava revisionist renegades, were a very intense period fraught with risks and dangers, not only for the revolutionary movement, but for Joma's very life. Although Joma survived the assassination attempt masterminded by the Lavas in collusion with the Marcos fascist regime, with only a slash wound on his left elbow, the rectification movement caused 3 casualties on Joma's side: a very close comrade and friend, Carlos B. Del Rosario, and Joma's brother, Francisco, and his driver, whose bodies were never found. These dastardly deeds were definitely those of the Lava revisionist renegades. It was not only during the struggle with the Lavas that Joma became the target of assassination attempts. The Contras, who were the targets of the second Great Rectification movement, colluded with the Estrada regime in planning an assassination plot against Joma, with Romulo Quintanar, a TESDA, or a Technical Education and Skills Development Authority official, serving as the chief project officer. The Contras, Quintanar, Tabara, and De La Cruz, had become military intelligence assets of the intelligence services of the armed forces of the Philippines. Under the cover of his private placement agency, which monopolizes the placement of TESDA trainees for overseas work, Quintanar made a trip to the Netherlands in 2000 to prepare the intelligence work on Joma's whereabouts. The assassination plot was foiled because on the day that the assassin was out to strike, Joma, who was about to cross the street with a toddler in tow from the office to the shop opposite it, was alerted by a strange, heavily coated figure in spring approaching him in the act of drawing an axe. So he hastily retreated to the safety of the office. In 2001, he initiated the establishment of the International League of the People's Struggle, or the ILPS. He was its chairperson from 2003 to 2019. ILPS coordinates anti-imperialist and democratic struggles all over the world. It is now the biggest and strongest anti-imperialist alliance. Joma consistently used Marxist-Leninist political economy to investigate new exploitative mechanisms and patterns of neocolonialism and globalization under imperialism, including those that have emerged and have been dominant in the formerly socialist or nominally or just aspirationally socialist countries, as well as those in the so-called Asian Tigers and the BRICS member states. He continued to write the anniversary statements for the CPP, NPA, and NDFP until 2022. For the CPP Second Congress, he drafted a new program for the People's Democratic Revolution and the revised CPP Constitution. He enjoined the Congress to wage a rectification campaign to combat currents of conservatism which had started to creep among the revolutionary ranks. In conclusion, let me quote from his valedictory to the Filipino people. The Filipino People's Democratic Revolution is invincible. Quotes, "It is the toiling masses and the rest of the people who fight for national liberation, democracy, and socialism against imperialism and all reaction who let us hope for a bright future of world peace and common prosperity. They are now waging anti-imperialist and democratic mass struggles against the current global crisis that has been brought about by revisionist betrayal of socialism, neoliberalism, and fascism. These are the prelude to the resurgence of the world proletarian revolution. End quote. Let Ka Joma live in our continuing struggle for national and social liberation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ka Julie. We are fortunate to hear firsthand what the experience was like of struggling with the old Communist Socialist Merger Party and what it took to re-establish the CPP. For the youth, it is also inspiring to hear about Ka Joma's start in the youth and student movement and how that was able to grow and spark the resurgence of the Filipino revolutionary struggle for national liberation. So, the movement grew even more upon the re-establishment of the party in 1968 and became increasingly threatening to those in power. But by that time, the Marcos was overthrown in 1986, the Philippine revolutionary movement was facing a period of disorientation. The basic principles that led to the upsurge and growth of the movement in the 70s slowly corroded, and the whole movement was in turmoil. Ka Joma learned of these developments when he was outside the country. During the Second Great Rectification Movement, or SGRM, the party called on everyone to go back to the basics, to study basic principles of MLM, and to once again immerse in the lives of the masses. Many comrades remember the manner in which Ka Joma handled this period of disorientation in the movement. During this time, Ka Joma was not only being attacked by the reactionary government, but also by comrades who were being criticized for the role in the disorientation. One comrade remembers how Ka Joma upheld the discipline in maintaining the integrity of the whole party and refrained from publicly naming those who have erred. Others recall how he drew the line between what was bourgeois and what was proletarian, in a time when many have lost sight. Until now, contributions were invaluable in drafting the key documents such as reaffirm our basic principles and rectify our errors that continue to guide comrades until now. Here to give us a recounting of his own experience working and struggling alongside Ka Joma during this period of SGRM is Louis Jalandoni, who was a fellow member of the National Democratic Front of the Philippines peace negotiating panel with Ka Joma. Welcome, Ka Louis.
Good afternoon, comrades. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, Ka Joma received reports from different regions on the situation in these regions. The reports presented serious problems confronting the different regions. Ka Joma studied the reports and wrote a draft of a rectification movement. The final edition of this document would be the basis for the Second Great Rectification Movement. He shared the draft with several Kasamas here in the Netherlands and to comment and give additional ideas on this document. During this time, many different ideas had crept into our revolutionary movement. The errors pointed out in the rectification document were influencing the thinking and ideology of Kasamas. The Netherlands was not exempt from this. People like Sixto Carlos, Tosong as he was called, Joel Rocamora, and Ed de la Torre, who at that time headed the organization in Europe, were carrying ideological lines contrary to the line of the rectification document. They began holding sessions, often in the house of Sixto Carlos, consolidating Kasamas, now former Kasamas, to their line of thinking and criticizing the rectification document. We did not know about this. As a matter of fact, when the second draft of the document came out and Joma again shared this with us, I talked to Ed De La Torre. I told him, let's study this document and discuss how we shall bring this down to the membership. What I did not know was that after our talk, Ed had gone into a meeting with Kasama, now former Kasama, to discuss how not to implement the document. This period of trying to explain the document and get Kasamas to understand the importance of the rectification movement was a very difficult period for all of us here in the Netherlands. Tony Zoomer, called Manong, and I would attend meetings where we would try to explain the importance of the document and the rectification movement. Some of the former Kasamas were even boasting that pinirito namin si Manong. We roasted Manong. Ka Julie asked a Kasama, now no longer a Kasama, have you read the document? And she said, no. So without any basis but her friendship with those who rejected the document, she rejected the document and the rectification movement. This struggle was not only confined to Utrecht or to Europe, nor to the Philippines, but also in other global regions as well. After a certain time, those who were for the second great rectification movement became known as the reaffirmists. Reaffirm our basic principles. Those who were against, they were called the rejectionists, who rejected the rectification movement. Here in Utrecht, Bani Lansang came up with another word. He called the rejectionists contras. The term contras was used in Nicaragua for those whom the U.S. sent to destroy the victorious Sandinista revolution. And so, contrast is now used as a synonym with the rejectionists. What was the second great rectification movement about? Major errors had been practiced in the movement for several years. These errors were so great that we began losing our mass base. If the second great rectification movement, sometimes called SGRM, had not taken place, I do not know what would have happened to our revolutionary movement. The SGRM criticized and corrected the errors. Some examples of these errors were the line of the strategic counteroffensive during the stage of strategic defensive. This was criticized for going against the principles of the Protected People's War. 3 stages of the People's War, which are strategic defensive, stalemate, strategic stalemate, and strategic offensive. In the 1980s, leading cadres in Mindanao, led by NPA Commander Quintanar, set up big military formations, actually company-sized military formations, which were premature. This was for a quick military victory. Persons who were supposed to do mass work were instead transformed into staff units to support the big NPA formations. In the beginning, there were military successes, but later there were big losses. And instead of analyzing why there were big losses, the conclusion of the comrades in error was there were spies inside the movement. They were called deep penetration agents. This led to a most painful period in our revolutionary history, where very many Kasamas were killed because they were accused of being spies, with very little or no evidence to support the accusation. There were many other errors that were criticized and corrected. These errors were sharply criticized by the rectification movement, reaffirm our basic principles and correct errors. This second great rectification movement was essentially an education movement. The lack of ideological work through many years led the revolutionary movement to make these serious mistakes. One result of the rectification movement is the stress on ideological study on different levels. In the end, only a small percentage of the revolutionary movement rejected the rectification movement. The great majority accepted and underwent rectification ideologically, politically, and organizationally. Then the National Democratic Front became stronger, and the New People's Army guerrilla fronts opened and developed. We regained the confidence of the masses. Ka Joma led the first and second great rectification movements. He also saw the start of the third rectification movement, which was started with the second Congress of the party. He founded the party and saw the party through different periods of advance and errors and further advance. In his last message to us, as Ka Julie said, Ka Joma declared, "The National Democratic Revolution of the Filipino people is invincible." How right he is. Long live Joma. Ka Joma lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ka Louie. It is very informative to hear about how, even from afar, Ka Joma showed initiative and daring in struggling against ideas that were leading the revolutionary movement astray. Even in exile, Ka Joma never wavered in pursuing the revolutionary path. He lived according to the mass line. He was a listener of stories of Filipino and other migrants and refugees, always interested in learning about their individual and collective situation and the situation of their families back home. Life in exile for Joma was a life of struggle. By putting Ka Joma in the terrorist list, U.S. imperialism put all its backing behind measures to ensure that he continued to be deprived of the rights of a recognized refugee. The enemy continued to pursue him even in exile. The fascist Manila government at some point sent assassination teams to kill Ka Joma. When it failed to do so, the GRP lobbied the Dutch government to prosecute him for murder. But Ka Joma's indomitable spirit, his toothy grin, and his revolutionary optimism, the defense of comrades and political support of allies and friends continued to baffle and frustrate the enemy, and his revolutionary legacy continued to be felt in his homeland. To show this, we are lucky to be able to present a clip from the upcoming documentary, My Friend, the Terrorist, A Tale of Love and Revolution, from Multimond Production, directed by Malcolm Guy and Demetri Estelacropolis.
is like a poem into the rustle of leaves, the break of twigs, the ripples of the river, the smell of fire, and the ashes of the orchard. The gorilla is like a poet. The gorilla is like a poet.
Sige, akong message sa inyo ha nga, ang hinaot ko nga makakita ko sa inyo personal, niya mga kaistorya, niya mahimong kung anhimo sa Pilipinas, makabuot na ang sosyalistang revolusyon, so mahimong makakita ko sa inyo ha, makauban, para mahimong mas makakuan ko unsa ang kuan ko sa inyo mga kasinatian pa kabayan sa inyong giunsa ninyo paglabang sa mga sakripisyo kana nya manghinaot nga sa dagan mahimong makita-kita kita kana kato dugang kadasig salamat.
The inner silence, the outer innocence.
Sige. Hi Ka Joma, Mother Juliet. Bali ang amo lang ipaabot sa imong nga mensahe nga unta na kanang okay ra mo dinha dayon naamo sa maayong kahimtang luyong nga nalayo mo sa amo dinhi karon. Nalayo mo sa atong nasod. Tapos mabuhi mo. Bisan kung hangtod pa sa hangtod sa kaning kadaugan sa pangkalibutang revolusyon. Dili mo mawala sa panumduman sa katawan.
The gorilla is like a poet.
In exile, Ka Joma continued to be in touch with comrades in the Philippines, always ready to take on tasks and provide ideological, political, and organizational guidance. Indeed, Ka Joma in exile was never far from the home front, his life dedicated to national and social liberation of the motherland. To give insight into how Ka Joma continued to be a reliable guiding fight for those in the movement even in exile, we have Judy Taguiwalo. Judy was a first quarter storm activist in 1970, a Marcos martial law political prisoner, and a retired university professor. Welcome, Judy.
Hello everyone, I am Judy Taguiwalo from the Philippines, a first quarter storm 1970 activist. The last time I personally saw Joma was in 2001 during the first ILPS assembly in Zutphen, Netherlands. I remember how happy he looked, happy to see his efforts at building a global anti-imperialist network come into being, happy to be in the midst of so many kababayan whom he hadn't seen for decades, happy to participate in discussions inside and outside the session halls. In that event, I was with then two young UP instructors who were members of the Congress of Teachers and Educators for Nationalism and Democracy, or CONTENT. I am sure JMS must have taken notice of how far these two young instructors have gone since then. One of them has served for 9 years as a representative of teachers in the Philippine Congress and is known for being articulate, militant, and staunchly anti-imperialist. The other is an academic scholar and administrator and a militant unionist and activist in the university. These two belong to the third or fourth generation birthed by the National Democratic Movement founded by Joma. His influence spans several generations of activists. As I wrote in 2022 after his death was announced, He was affectionately called by different names depending on the generation. His early 60s, Student Cultural Association of the University of the Philippines or SCAOP, and kabataang makabayan contemporaries called him Joe. He was Joma to my FQS 1970 generation. Then, JMS, Tatang, Lolo, to succeeding generations whose awakening to the nature of the Philippine crisis and the need to continue Bonifacius' unfinished revolution. But this time, of a new type, was inspired by his writing and practice. Joma was a great professor of history and revolution, but he was first and foremost a revolutionary, and he knew what it was to sacrifice in the service of the people. I never get to meet Joma again since 2001, but his presence was felt as he was tireless in providing timely and astute analysis of domestic and international developments on social media and online fora. The publication, circulation of his collected writings revealed the range of issues and concerns that he tackled, always with a revolutionary standpoint, viewpoint, and method. Today, on Joma's second death anniversary, I recall Maus, the foolish old man who removed the mountains. And I quote, "It tells of an old man who lived in northern China long, long ago and was known as the foolish old man of North Mountain. His house faced south, and beyond his doorway stood two great peaks obstructing the way. He called his sons, and hoe in hand they began to dig up these mountains with great determination. Another gray beard, known as the wise old man, saw them and said derisively, 'How silly of you to do this. It is quite impossible for you few to dig up these two huge mountains.' The foolish old man replied, 'When I die, my sons will carry on. When they die, there will be my grandsons, and then their sons and grandsons, and so on to infinity. High as they are, the mountains cannot grow any higher, and with every bit we dig, they will be that much lower. Why can't we clear them away?' End of quote. JMS, Tatang, Lolo has passed on, but his legacy lives as his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren continue to dig the mountains of imperialism, feudalism, and bureaucrat capitalism, blocking the sunlight from entering the lives of the Filipino people. We build your monument, matandang hangal, foolish old man, beloved Jose Maria Sison, in the continuing struggle of the Filipino people for national freedom and democracy. Mabuhay kayo.
Thank you, Judy, for your tribute. Next in the program, we invite someone from the audience to read a poem written by Josie Pinkihan, at the time a migrant working in Hong Kong, that depicts her feelings of being away from her homeland and how she shares that feeling with Ka Joma. She dedicates this poem to Ka Joma, imagining a future where we will welcome him back to a Philippines liberated from the enemies he spent his life fighting.
Sometimes I thought we were in the same boat, where we were forced to paddle to other shores, leaving familiar faces, gatherings, and places. Sometimes I thought we were in the same boat, yearning for our families back home and the places we used to roam. But my notions were proven wrong when I read your poem and heard the song. Unlike you, I can go home to my family and munch peanuts glazed with honey. But even then, dear comrade, someday soon, without a doubt, you'll find yourself picking mangoes or be surrounded by a multitude of orchids. Your skin caressed by the tropical sun as you tread hills and mountains that have longed for the footsteps of its exiled son. You'll have yourself in a place called home. Among the comrades, kith and kin, giggling, singing, or just mingling. Someday the beasts that caused your exile would scurry for cover, for it would be them will topple over. The might of us who produce the goods and till the precious land would be greater than the rulers of old, for we will pave the glorious road to lead you to mountainous islands full of orchids, full of mangoes.
What a beautiful poem. Thank you to our reader and to the poet for the contribution. To have a living movement that can pave that glorious road to liberation, a movement must pay attention to the role of the youth. It was a young Joma that gave new life to the movement for national liberation in the Philippines, and national democratic movement continues to renew itself with new activists. This is only possible by arousing, organizing, and mobilizing the youth. To speak about Ka Joma's impact and call to the youth, for our next speaker, let us welcome Mhing Gomez, Chairperson of Anak Bayan National. Anak Bayan is the broad national democratic mass organization of the Filipino youth.
Anak Bayan, together with its chapters and members, once again give its highest tribute to Professor Jose Maria Sison for his great sacrifices and invaluable contribution to the Filipino people's cause for national and social liberation. It is a great honor to speak before you on the occasion of the second death anniversary of great proletarian, revolutionary, theorist, and professor Jose Maria Sison. 2 years have passed since Ka Joma's passing, but his revolutionary spirit, his teaching remains. It continues to guide not just the youth and student movement, but the whole national democratic movement. His writing remains a guiding light in attaining our national democratic aspirations. Now more than ever, at a time of great social unrest, sharpening contradictions, and intensifying resistance, national democratic activists, revolutionaries, anti-imperialists, progressive, and democratic forces around the globe must carry the spirit of rectification. Critically assess our errors, actively combat any forms of bourgeois liberal ideologies, left and right tendencies, and comprehensively carry forward the revolution until complete victory. It has been 60 years since Ka Joma founded Kabataang Makabayan. We, the Filipino youth, still stand at a crossroad of great potential and significant challenges. Restricted access to quality and free education, which should be a basic right, remains out of reach for many Filipino youth. Budget cut to public schools and universities have worsened the situation, leading to the overcrowded classroom, a lack of quality facilities, and insufficient support, both for teachers and students. While programs like free tuition exist in state universities, they are unable to cater to most of the youth in the Philippines since they are severely underfunded and annually receiving budget cuts. The Marcos regime, in tandem with capitalist educators, are pushing for enrollment to private schools instead of state universities, abandoning the state's mandate to provide an accessible and quality education. Students in rural areas face even greater barriers in accessing quality education. Insufficient teachers, poor infrastructure, and limited learning materials leave them at a disadvantage, either forced to take on part-time jobs or work abroad. The soaring prices of basic commodities, while wages are continuously depressed, also forced many students to abandon their studies and work or look for a job to be able to support their families and cater to their daily needs. Adding to these challenges is the proposed revival of the mandatory ROTC, a major threat to academic freedom and democratic rights of the youth. In exposing this reactionary government's desperation, Anak Bayan referenced Ka Joma's mercenary tradition of the armed forces of the Philippines, which he delivered in the graduation of the Philippine Military Academy on 1966. Almost 60 years have passed and the rottenness of AFP and the reactionary government remains. AFP, PNP have a long track record of red tagging, hazing, harassment against the youth on campus. AFP and PNP's long list of attacks on youth goes beyond our campuses. To this day, AFP is yet to be held accountable on the abduction of two youth environmental defenders, Jed Tamano and Janila Castro. These graves conditions are pushing more and more Filipino youth to militantly and collectively fight for our political and economic rights and to wage revolution to attain our national democratic aspirations. Borrowing Ka Joma's word in his speech on student power, quote, students who truly stand for revolutionary change should always strive for integration with larger and even more dynamic social forces. That is to say, the exploited masses of the people. End quote. This reflects the fundamental orientation of the youth that we in Anak Bayan is committed to fulfilling. Following the successful conclusion of our 9th National Congress held last December 6 to 8, over the past 3 years, Anak Bayan has faced challenges in uniting youth from various sectors of society. These challenges have led to a consistent decline in our expansion efforts, significantly impacting our undertaking of relating the struggle of the student with the sectors, with other sectors, especially the most exploited, such as the peasant and the workers. But Ka Joma's teaching and legacy have been a steady guiding light for the Filipino youth in realizing our historical rule while also courageously struding on the path of rectification. 5 decades after Lipunan and Revolusyong Pilipino or Philippine Society and Revolution was written, it has remained the most comprehensive analysis of Philippine society, arming the Filipino people of a concrete and scientific tool in liberating the semi-feudal and semi-colonial society from its three basic ills: feudalism, bureaucrat capitalism, and imperialism. The LRP has been the cornerstone of every educational endeavor of Anak Bayan, urgently providing analysis to the standard issues of the day and laying out the means for higher political unities with the masses. But above all, LRP has inspired thousands of Filipino youth, both locally and overseas, to partake in the national democratic revolution, with armed struggle as its principal form. With this, the National Congress reaffirms the necessity to undertake a study campaign of Philippine society and revolution, and that all Anak Bayan chapters and members study the teaching of Ka Joma Sison, as also formalized in our recently amended Constitution. As the most comprehensive national democratic mass organization of the youth, Ka Joma's teaching have been indispensable in pursuing the national democratic aspiration of the youth and the toiling masses. Ka Joma is one of the many who have proven that we, the youth, can achieve so much, especially when we serve the people. Ka Joma was only 25 when he founded Kabataang Makabayan, and 29 years old when he led the rectification movement of the Communist Party of the Philippines. Many youth take inspiration from the life and struggle of Ka Joma. And the Nakbayan takes pride in our member who willingly gave their life to serve the people. As we give salute to Ka Joma, we also want to take this opportunity to give our highest tribute and red salute to Archie Caron Arceta, Azaze Kamabel Galang, and Gian Marcos Kareb Taiko, martyrs of Anakbayan, heroes of National Democratic Revolution. Mabuhay si Ka Joma, mabuhay ang kabataang makabayan, mabuhay ang kabataang lumalaban, mabuhay ang pambansa demokratikong pakikibaka ng mamamayan.
Very much. It is moving to hear how the youth are heeding Ka Joma's call to participate in militant struggle and fulfill the aspirations of the nation and the masses for liberation. All around the world, Ka Joma continues to inspire youth, especially Filipino youth. Next up is a youth performance from the ARAK band, formed within Anakbayan, Seattle, singing the original song Lagi Ko Kayong Kasama, based on Ka Joma's poem I'm Always With You. This version was performed at the tribute to Ka Joma at the 2024 7th International Assembly of the ILPS.
Lagi ko kayong kasama sa inyong pag-aaral, sa gawain at laban. Lagi ko kayong kasama sa pagtupad ng ating mahigpit na tungkulin. Lagi ko kayong kasama sa linya ng atya. Lagi at lagi marahas na ipagpatuloy ang talagyan. Huwag hayaan na pagkatapang hindi may darating na ating dakilan. Nilusasan, lalo pang itaas ang pulang bandila. 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 Sa ngawin ang buong bansa, magpalalim sa bawat lokalidad, magkahawan ang bawat kahirapan. Yakin ang ating tagumpay, kung kayong kasama.
Raise the red flag ever higher.
Cover the whole country.
Go deep in every locality.
Overcome every difficulty.
Ensure our victory.
I am always with you.
It is by you carried on.
We will continue to fight.
Always.
Lalo pang itaas ang pulang bandila. Lalo pang itaas ang pulang bandila. Lalo pang itaas ang pulang bandila. Ka Joma!
As a committed proletarian internationalist, Ka Joma upheld the proletarian duty to advance the world revolution of the working class and the toiling masses towards socialism. He was a strong defender of MLM as the guiding ideology of the world's proletariat. Ka Joma wrote on the situation in the Philippines as well as on different countries and the world at large, presenting excellent insight and analysis of concrete conditions to advance the people's democratic revolution. He wrote articles, speeches, statements, critical of fascism, human rights abuses, and exploitative economic and foreign policies. He granted interviews to the media, academic researchers, and the public, asserting the correctness of MLM and how it applies to the strategies and tactics of the People's Democratic Revolution in the Philippines and the proletarian socialist struggles around the world. To give us more detailed overview of Ka Joma's continued relevance and significance as a political theorist, held in high esteem by people all over the world, let us hear from Professor Sara Raymundo. Professor Raymundo hosted the podcast Itanong Mo Kay Prof. Featuring Professor Jose Maria Sison. She is a professor at the University of the Philippines Diliman Center for International Studies and the International Liaison Officer of Bayan.
Jose Maria Sison's legacy in the realm of the global proletarian revolution and the struggle for national liberation in the Philippines is both profound and multifaceted, reflecting a synthesis of Marxist-Leninist Maoist theory with specific socio-political contexts of Philippine society. At its core, the revolutionary movement here in the Philippines sought to address deep-seated social injustices exacerbated by colonial legacies and neocolonial influences. Sison's advocacy for nationalism was intricately linked to class struggle. He posited that true liberation could only be achieved by continuing the unfinished revolution of the Katipuneros. In his seminal work, Philippine Society and Revolution, Sison articulates a vision that transcends national boundaries, framing the Philippine struggle as an integral part of a larger international movement toward socialism. By dissecting the historical trajectory of colonialism in the Philippines, he elucidates how entrenched socio-economic structures such as imperialism, feudalism, and bureaucrat capitalism impede national liberation while advocating for a revolutionary path that resonates with oppressed peoples worldwide. His analytical approach not only contextualizes local struggles, but also aligns them with global aspirations for justice and equality. Struggle for National Democracy is a book that further illustrates Sison's enduring influence on activist education within and beyond Philippine contexts. In his seminal work, he delves into the historical context of Philippine society, tracing the roots of exploitation, inequality, and oppression that have plagued the country for generations. He examines the legacy of colonialism, imperialism, and feudalism, highlighting how these forces have shaped the political and economic landscape of the Philippines and perpetuated the cycle of poverty and underdevelopment. Sison argues that the key to achieving national democracy lies in mobilizing the Filipino masses to challenge the ruling elite and their foreign backers, who have long benefited from exploitation and marginalization of the people. He emphasizes the importance of building a broad and united front of progressive forces led by the Peasant Worker Alliance to push for genuine social and political reforms that prioritize the interests of the Filipino people. This perspective underscores a commitment to advancing a national democratic revolution led by the proletariat rather than by liberal bourgeois forces. The Communist Party of the Philippines, which he helped establish, embodies this ideology through its protracted people's war against both domestic oppression and foreign domination. The impact of Sison's writings and his foundational role in building revolutionary mass movement on a national and international scale, spanning over 50 years and certainly over 50 publications, cannot be overstated. They provide critical insights into his revolutionary philosophy, strategic outlook, and the current challenges to and prospects of the struggle for national liberation toward socialism in the Philippines and the building of a broad international united front against fascism and imperialism. Sison's legacy is not merely confined to Philippine borders. It serves as a beacon for global revolutionary movements striving against imperialism. His insights on inter-imperialist conflicts reveal an acute understanding of contemporary geopolitical dynamics. In interviews reflecting on his decades-long activism, he posits that intensifying contradictions among imperialist powers can create fertile conditions for revolutionary resurgence. Comrade Jose Maria Sison's life and body of work must be seriously studied for anyone interested in understanding the complex dynamics of Philippine society and the challenges facing the struggles for national liberation and proletarian revolution worldwide. His analysis is incisive, his arguments are compelling, and his vision for a free and prosperous Philippines and for all working peoples of the world is both inspiring and achievable. My deep gratitude to the comrades who organized this important event that honors the legacy of a great Filipino leader and comrade. Ka Joma lives.
Ka Joma forged solidarity among progressive people's movements around the world through helping establish the International League of People's Struggle, or ILPS, which has grown to be among the broadest, militant, and progressive anti-imperialist formations in the world. Active in over 40 countries, it builds unity, cooperation, and coordination of anti-imperialist and democratic struggles worldwide. To give more depth and insight into Ka Joma's influence and impact on activists engaged in global people's struggle is Azra Sayeed, Secretary General of ILPS, whose work on the ground has been organizing landless farmers, including women, in her country of Pakistan.
Good evening, everybody. It is my honor to be speaking at this webinar. At this, also there is, I believe, physical participation for the second anniversary of Ka Joma's passing away. I met Ka Joma in 2001 at the first International League of People's Struggles General Assembly held in the Netherlands, of which Judy Taguiwalo also just spoke. And after that, I met him many times as a member of ILPS and being associated with various Filipino organizations that included mass organizations and research institutions. Professor Sison was a revolutionary, but he was not only a revolutionary for his beloved country, the Philippines, but a person who ignited the spark for hundreds and thousands across the globe to challenge monopoly capital to fight against imperialism. For me, it is very hard to separate Ka Joma from the Philippine movements. And that is because his writings are so clearly reflected in the practice of the mass movements that I have been associated with over more than 20 years, almost 3 decades now. After the fall of the Soviet Union, the atmosphere was of extreme disillusionment. There were seminars and talk shows that were broadcasting capitalism as the only moral order of the day. In those days, when people thought that anyone who still believed in socialism and communism was out of touch with grounded reality. But it was clear that Joma's teachings were like a bright star in that utter grimness of society, the utter decay that we were going through. He remained a beacon, and he has remained a beacon for those seeking to find a way out of the brutal assault of capitalism, of imperialism. All through the 1990s and into the new century, there are countless writings from Joma which show his intense mastery of scientific communism, his ability to assess the political depth of the chaos in which the so-called leftist parties and mass movements were left floundering, unable to find an ideological, political, or organizational direction. It has been said about Joma that his position as a revolutionary needs to be accentuated, for while the rest of the world's revolutionary movements are stagnating or on the verge of collapse, Philippines' radicalism has proved outstanding. I wholeheartedly agree with this statement. The Communist Party of the Philippines and the NPA, since their inception, have been under intense attack by not only the fascist state of the Philippines, but also US imperialism. Given the circumstances, it would not have been wrong to direct the party's efforts to strengthen itself and not look towards helping other parties and movements build themselves. But Joma was an internationalist. He strongly believed in building solidarity and support across countries, across regions, and globally. I've heard comrades from the Philippines mention that as early as in the 60s, when he first formed the CPP, he had already started building fraternal relationships with Indonesian comrades. The contributions of Joma and the Philippines movement to reach out to other movements in countries that were also suffering under the shackles of US imperialism, clogged in semi-colonial, semi-feudal mode of production, are invaluable and cannot be quantified. For instance, in Pakistan, the impact of General Zia's long tenure, who was maintained by the US imperialism, led to the growth of an extremely fascist country. The demands for land reforms were made unconstitutional and un-Islamic. Then right after General Zia was killed in the 1988, the world witnessed the fall of the Soviet Union. And it led to the disarray of socialist and communist parties in Pakistan, who were in any way divided in deadly factions siding with either China or Russia. As the US unleashed its diabolical neoliberal agenda on the world, it was very difficult to critique US imperialism and to organize communities. In such difficult times, political education programs offered through Filipino activists were invaluable, and they all reflected Joma's teaching. I want to quote from an article Joma wrote in 1990 titled "The Decline and Rise of Socialism." For the benefit of those, I quote, "For the benefit of those who are dismayed by the ostensible momentary victory of capitalism, it is worthwhile to recall the fact that the socialist cause had suffered more serious setbacks in the past and yet has always bounced back with greater vigor and strength." This was very true, and this really gave a lot of us a lot of strength and the guidance and a clear path to follow. After the fall of the Soviet Union across Asia Pacific, Filipino activists are found in all public forums, mass movements, NGOs, helping build mass movements and helping those who were present. They were helping individuals and groups to organize themselves. One of the most valuable interventions were on making mass organizations learn about their colonial history. Our education systems had stopped critiquing British imperialism or colonialism, or US colonialism and imperialism, and there were no discussions at all on these topics. At this time, there were so many readings from Joma critiquing US imperialism and providing critique on the contradictions in the neoliberal economy, which would pave the way for resurgence of socialism. His teachings were a key catalyst which regrouped or brought in young people into the political arena, willing once again to fight for national liberation. Suddenly, every peasant movement started to get organized. The critique of the Green Revolution, the call for genuine land reforms, in-depth understanding of neoliberalism and structural adjustment programs became the backbone of our political education programs in so many countries. And these were the seeds of resistance that was sown through Joma's critique, especially the Philippine society and revolution. It has allowed many of us to look at our own countries and carry out social investigation and class analysis and have clarified the semi-colonial, semi-feudal nature of our society. For me, the work of thousands of Filipino revolutionaries with whom I have had the honor of learning from and working with them side by side, I have understood the central message that Ka Joma gave us: serve the people. I would like to add that for a man who had been separated from the Philippine society, let us say from 77 to 86, as he was imprisoned by these fascists, and then forced into exile till the end of his life, his connection to his country, his in-depth understanding of the Philippine society, and his undefeatable will to fight for the liberation of his people and his country is of intense value to all of us who have started on the path to national liberation. His depth of understanding was not limited to his country only. He was always way ahead of others in analyzing the situation of other countries and being able to provide an analysis of what could be expected of international movements. For instance, in a message to the Freedom Road Socialist Organization in 2001, I think it was 2017, Joma stated, for a while, from the time of the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, US imperialism appeared to be the sole superpower in a unipolar world, in which it could impose its will and brute force on the people of the world. But since then, the US neoliberal economic policy and neoconservative policy of full spectrum dominance have resulted in more frequent and worse crises and wars that have undermined and debilitated United States imperialism. The strategic decline of US imperialism has accelerated in the 24th century. These words, all through those years, we would hear his analysis, and it would keep on giving us the energy and the understanding and the analysis to keep working and continuing to build movements and organizations in our country, which could be in service to the people and be the path-breaking measures for our own national democracy. In 2014 and then 2019, at the 6th IA, he provided such a clear writing, a broad outline on the requisites in revolutionary class struggle for building the socialist future. These writings provide further direction to the international movements for building themselves step by step to overcome the brutal forces of imperialism in their home countries. I'm sure most of you have read his last writing on the world situation, which is a testimony to his grasp on the political economy of the world. This was his last work for the International League of People's Struggle in 2022 of September. It is a brilliant analysis of the world situation in days when the imperialist powers were jostling against each other. Again, he provides a clear outline for revolutionaries to further their study and analysis of the situation based on their countries and territories. Maybe for him, to a world proletariat that he was, it was one and the same to work for liberation of his people or the people of his world. Joma once stated, the revolutionary struggle of the Filipino communists, the proletarians and semi-proletarians in the Philippines is part and parcel of the revolutionary struggle of the world, proletariat and people. Contributes to the advance of the global anti-imperialist movement and the world proletarian socialist revolution. Our victories of the world proletariat and people are the victories. Their victories are our victories. I have heard close colleagues of Joma talk about his ability to build unities among groups, his very open-minded attitude towards people with different political positions, and doing all this without losing his own hardline position. According to Joma, the CPP wants to maintain the distinction between ideological and political tasks. CPP would ensure that its performance of its ideological work does not demolish the accomplishments of the political task of developing relations of proletarian internationalism among genuine communist parties, as well as a solidarity alliance against imperialism amongst parties of all sorts. There's no use trying to dogmatically apply the ideological purity of Marxism-Leninism in conducting political relations with non-communist entities, especially at this time when there are no big socialist countries in the world. We are amidst a lagging phase of the accomplishments of the world proletarian revolution, and there is a need to ensure that a broad base is for the resurgence of the socialist cause on a world scale. Today, the CPP has fraternal relations with others across the world, whether it's Asia Pacific, Latin America, Europe, or North America. These relations are present due to the constant dialogue and debate that comrades in CPP under the brilliant leadership of Comrade Joma have carried on. His constant call was for a united front, not only in his own country, but to build a strong anti-imperialist, anti-fascist united front against US imperialism, a country which has been the source of primary contradiction in our struggle for national liberation. These words of revolutions of our time continue to guide me and thousands across the world those who fight to their utmost ability to break away from the shackles of the fascist tyranny of imperialism. I will end with Joma's message, which he gave to Freedom Road Socialist Organization in 2017. He said, under the leadership of the Proletarian Party with communist foresight, we need the revolutionary trade unions and the mass organizations of various oppressed classes and sectors of society. We need the Red Guards or the self-defense units of mass organizations and communities, and the Red Army or People's Army wherever possible and necessary. We need to build the Soviets or the local organs of political power, what will become the base of the socialist state. We need the alliance in every country, the anti-imperialist solidarity of peoples and proletarian internationalism. We need to live. We need to develop all the revolutionary forces and resources for waging all forms of struggle and winning the revolution against imperialism, revisionism, and reaction. Long live international solidarity. Long live Ka Joma. Thank you.
Thank you, Azra. That was a moving comradely tribute. Ka Joma's influence was, of course, not limited to activists in other countries in the Global South. Activists in the Imperial Core also have an appreciation for Ka Joma's teachings. We will now hear from one of those activists, Angel, a trade union organizer and women's movement activist.
Good morning and afternoon to everyone. I would like to start by expressing my deepest gratitude to the JMS Legacy Foundation and all of the speakers today. When I was asked to speak on the impact of Ka Joma on my own development and of our movement here, I truly had no idea where to start. In truth, Ka Joma's life and work has impacted nearly every aspect of my life in politics. But I hope to present some of those points here today in hopes that it can add a small contribution to explain the many ways that Ka Joma has impacted the oppressed and exploited people of the world and the continuing relevance of his life and work to our movements and struggles. In the women's movement, Ka Joma's work has helped us struggle against anti-people and incorrect ideas promoted heavily in our current society. Just a few years ago, I was part of a group of women's activists across the US who were frustrated and dismayed by the lack of a genuine anti-imperialist women's movement. It was then that we began to study Ka Joma's work, including reading his 2016 statement on International Working Women's Day, where he said that women's emancipation is never possible under imperialism, and that the women's movement must continue to expose and oppose the ruling bourgeoisie and its state. That working women must unite with the rest of the people to change the ruling system, to end exploitation and oppression, and ultimately must take part in rebuilding a society where women and the rest of the people are not exploited and oppressed by imperialism and its reactionary agents. After study and discussion, we turned these words into action and struggled against the incorrect bourgeois feminism that dominated our movement. And we moved to form an even larger national and genuinely anti-imperialist women's organization that is now proudly a member of IWA, the International Women's Alliance. It is in deep gratitude to Ka Joma and his life and work that we are able to take up such an honorable mission. It was Ka Joma who taught us that we have to fight for the correct line, because the correct line actually reflects the interests, the demands, and the aspirations of the people. Other works that have been integral to our development has been his article on postmodernism and identity politics, which have helped guide us to unite with people agitated by these issues while still upholding our class line, as well as his article on the requirements of the Revolutionary United Front that explain that class line and particularly how it applies to building a broad anti-imperialist united front. When I sat down to ask other organizers and activists in the US on Ka Joma's impact, his work, Philippine Society and Revolution, PSR, consistently comes up. Marxism, Leninism, Maoism, MLM, is the summing up of the experience of the working class around the world in waging revolution and building socialism. Ka Joma, through his PSR and other works, added significantly to the treasury of MLM by summing up the experiences thus far of the Filipino people in waging their national democratic revolution. PSR serves as a guide both to the revolution in the Philippines, but also to the people around the world in learning how to sum up history and how to draw lessons, concrete lessons that we can apply to advance our struggle forward. We discussed how Ka Joma was truly the best example of what it means to be humble and unifying. Even on his YouTube channel, you see that he was always willing to engage with people, whether they were young, whether their groups were small, or still figuring out what to do. And at the same time, Ka Joma was always vigilant against ideas and trends that would harm the masses and their cause, which he combated fiercely when they appeared and tried to hamper or defeat the people's struggles. Lastly, I would like to end by sharing an interaction that I had when I went to the Philippines recently. An organizer there told me that she was moved when she discovered that so many of us that she met from the US talked about how inspired we were by Ka Joma and how attentively we studied his works. Part of this was due to Ka Joma's brilliance and ability to so clearly sum up the history and experiences and draw concrete lessons from it. But the other part of it is that Ka Joma introduced us to the struggle of the Filipino people who continue to inspire us more and more every day. In a period where the imperialists tell workers and oppressed people of the world that there is nothing beyond this rotten and decaying social system, in a period where revisionists took power in former socialist countries and established capitalism, it is the national democratic struggle of the Filipino people that remains the brightest light, reminding all of us that a new and better world is not only possible, but is being actively fought for. When discussing the impact of Ka Joma with other activists and organizers here, we also discussed Ka Joma's genuine internationalism. He spent so much of his time building up instruments for solidarity between people's struggles, such as the International League of People's Struggles, the ILPS, as well as producing invaluable writings on the world situation, the waging of revolution in different countries, for example, between the imperialist countries and the semi-feudal, semi-colonial countries, among other things. But perhaps most importantly, Ka Joma taught us that the victory of the National Democratic Revolution in the Philippines would be his and the Filipino people's greatest contribution to the liberation of all oppressed and exploited people around the world. Ka Joma's strength can still be seen and felt in the ongoing fight of the Filipino people for their national and democratic rights against US imperialism and its local puppets. The fact that even after his passing, the movement has continued to advance is an example of that. Ka Joma said that he tends to be optimistic because he is ready to make sacrifices, to do the hard work and do the fighting. When speaking with other organizers here on the impact of Ka Joma, they speak of his revolutionary spirit and how it makes them more willing to do the hard work and do the fighting, to make sacrifices and to serve the people. So it is in his name, in Ka Joma's name, that we vow to continue our common struggle against imperialism, to pledge our support to the national liberation movements, and especially to the brave and valiant Filipino people in their struggle for national democracy and socialism, and to wake up every day and decide to choose the people and their just cause over the individual interests that this imperialist society and culture imposes on us. So mabuhay ang sambayanan Pilipino lumalaban, Ka Joma lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angel. It's so nice to see how Ka Joma's works continue to resonate with activists and organizers around the world. Before we go to the next part of our program, dedicated to how the JMS Legacy Foundation is carrying on Ka Joma's lessons and teachings, we will show a video based on one of his poems, The Long Struggle for Freedom.
It took more than 300 years for the Filipino nation to take shape and shake off the colonial yoke in hundreds of uprisings until the Katipunan and the people defeated the foe and won their freedom. Since the imperialist bird of prey cast its shadow and dug its claws on our beloved motherland, it has been more than 100 years that the people have continued to fight for national and social liberation. The last 50 years of the struggle has been most fruitful. The Revolutionary Party of the Proletarian, the People's Army, the United Front, the mass movement of the oppressed, and the People's Government. All these are ever growing in the archipelago and advancing in waves against the foe that rules the ever-rotting system of greed and terror and serves foreign masters that the people of the world detest. We see the rising trend of revolution amidst the crisis in the country and abroad that inflicts intolerable suffering and drives the people to struggle harder for their soonest freedom from tyranny and a bright future in socialism. We struggle long for freedom. We never give up, no matter how long. But we seize every moment to strike a blow against the foe and hasten the day of our liberation from all oppression and exploitation.
Since this event is not only a commemoration, but an announcement of an initiative that is concretely carrying out the call to carry on Ka Joma's legacy, we are honored to welcome the Executive Director of the JMS Legacy Foundation to tell us more. Let's hear from him now. Please welcome Dan Borjal.
First of all, I'm grateful to the previous speakers for their testimonies describing the impact of Ka Joma's works and his charismatic leadership on the lives of the people in our country and also on the struggles of the peoples in many countries around the world. It makes my part easier because they really give the reason why we are embarking on this project of setting up the JMS Legacy Foundation. Jose Maria Sison was a great Marxist thinker and practical leader of the Philippine Revolution. He follows in the footsteps of such great Marxist thinkers and leaders of people as Lenin and Mao, whose theoretical works and revolutionary practice had transformed not only their own countries, but changed the course of human history. To be a great theorist, one must base himself solidly on reality. Marx said, "Philosophers have hitherto only interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it. Real knowledge only comes through the interaction between theory and practice." An Indian Marxist, paraphrasing Marx, put it this way: "You cannot really know the world unless you try to change it." Jose Maria Sison's lifelong work as a great thinker and practical leader of a revolutionary movement has not only changed the course of Philippine history as it pertains to the Filipino people's struggle for national and social liberation, but has also influenced progressive and revolutionary movements around the world. His invaluable contributions to the realization of the people's aspiration for a new and better world transcends the boundaries of his native Philippines. Some of his books and writings have been translated into Russian, French, Spanish, and Turkish. Like Mao and Lenin, who applied the universal theory of Marxism to the concrete conditions of Russia and China, and led their respective peoples to victory in the revolution, Jose Maria Sison applied Marxism and its subsequent development to Leninism and Maoism to the concrete conditions of the Philippines, and have led the Filipino people's revolutionary movement to the point where he could rightly say on his deathbed, "The Filipino people's democratic revolution is invincible." Yes, Ka Joma, you had a great part in making that invincible. I dare to say that Jose Maria Sison is the father of Philippine Marxism, for he correctly applied, as no Filipino before him, the universal theory of Marxism and its subsequent development to Leninism and Maoism to the concrete conditions of the Philippines. Using this revolutionary theory, he correctly analyzed Philippine society as semi-colonial and semi-feudal, and based on this, set the concrete general political line of national democratic revolution through a protracted people's war with a socialist perspective. This correct analysis of Philippine society and general political line of the revolution is contained in his book, Philippine Society and Revolution, which some have called the Bible of Filipino revolutionary activists. He further developed this line in specific characteristics of our People's War, somewhat differentiating the People's War in the Philippines from China's, pointing to the archipelagic character of the Philippines to China's huge landmass, and the Philippines being under the domination of a single imperialist power, U.S. imperialism, to China's being under the yoke of several competing imperialists and the important implications of these for the Philippine revolutionary struggle. The main bulk of his works, of course, pertains to the revolutionary movement in the Philippines. But as a deeply committed proletarian internationalist, he spent considerable time and effort in making contributions to the struggles of the oppressed and exploited peoples around the world. Through his periodic assessment of the world situation, he sought to encourage and inspire them in their struggles by pointing to the favorable objective and subjective conditions brought about by the internal contradictions and crises that beset the world capitalist system on the one hand, and the rising tide of resistance of the people on the other. He actively engaged with progressive and revolutionary parties and organizations in conferences and bilateral meetings to exchange theoretical views and practical experiences in revolutionary work. His wide and solid knowledge on philosophy, political economy, and social science, and their application in understanding the world in order to transform it, places him among the ranks of great revolutionary thinkers and leaders of his time. Jose Maria Sison's legacy should therefore be preserved for future generations in the struggle of humankind to build a new and better world. This is the rationale for setting up the Jose Maria Sison Legacy Foundation. The foundation's work will be composed of four main components: maintaining a museum on his life and works, running a website, organizing events, and offering access to his writings to progressive and revolutionary movements. The museum will put on exhibit photos, mementos, writings, and so on of Ka Joma based on the different phases of his life. Through the website, we shall try to give access to Ka Joma's works to a wide audience. We shall also organize events during so-called Red Letter Days to commemorate important historical events as occasions for progressive and revolutionary organizations to interact on various issues. With the archives, we intend to explore various ways by which to make Ka Joma's works available to those who may need them. The formal launching of the foundation will be held in February 2025 in conjunction with Ka Joma's 86th birth anniversary, which falls on February 8. By that time, the foundation would have been up and running. For this project to become viable, we shall need your support. You should expect that in the future, we will approach you for various types of support so that this project would be able to carry out its mission to serve some of the needs of current and future generations of revolutionaries, not only in the Philippines, but in the countries around the world. Thank you.
I know I speak for all of us when I say we're all very excited to see how this will develop in the coming months. Can't wait till February. So please keep in touch with the foundation through their mailing list to get up-to-date information on the foundation and its activities. In the last month before Ka Joma's passing, together with Ka Julie, he began discussing and drafting what would be his last piece of writing, his final message to the revolutionary forces and to the masses engaged in the revolutionary struggle in the Philippines. In The Filipino People's Democratic Revolution is Invincible, Ka Joma's statement for the 54th anniversary of the CPP, he offers a comprehensive view of the national situation and issues a powerful call to the people to continue and intensify their just and necessary fight for national liberation and democracy against the three basic problems plaguing Philippine society: imperialism, feudalism, and bureaucrat capitalism. Ka Joma charts the militant perseverance and steadfastness of the Filipino people's revolutionary struggle in the face of a rotten and crumbling system. The Filipino people's democratic revolution is invincible because the people will never stop fighting for their liberation. Contrary to the lies peddled by the reactionary government, the people know that it is the moribund ruling system beset by chronic crisis that is on its way out. Victory is not only necessary, it is inevitable. Ka Joma remained steadfast in advancing this fierce and unshakable truth until his very last breath. For this and so many other reasons, he will live on as a hero to the Filipino people and to other people struggling for a better world. We will continue to carry his words, his teachings, and his revolutionary optimism forward towards victory. In this sense, he will always be by our side, our everlasting comrade. We hope that you will continue to follow along with the Foundation's journey as they endeavor to carry on Ka Joma's life's lessons. So sign up for the mailing list, follow their accounts, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact the Foundation. Their information is included in the slide, and you can scan the QR code to visit their Linktree. Before we close our program, we would like to sincerely thank our speakers, our cultural performance, and our attendees for participating today. Thank you everyone behind the scenes for helping make this event happen. Thank you, National Democratic Front of the Philippines International Office, for hosting this event, and to the Jose Maria Sison Legacy Foundation for putting this program together. Let us part with a song that many of you will already be familiar with, the revolutionary cry of the world proletariat, whom Ka Joma served all his life, sung by the man himself. Here is Ka Joma singing the Internasyunal. Ka Joma lives! Ka Joma lives! Ka Joma lives! Ka Joma lives!
Bangon sa pagkakabusabos, bangon mga bihan ng gutom. Katwiran ay bulkang sasabog, kung lakas na dadagundong. Kapos ng kahapoy lagutin, tayong api ay magbalikwas. Tayo ngayon'y inaalipin, subalit atin ang bukas. Ito'y huling paglalaban, magkaisa ng masaklaw ng internasyonal ang sangkatauhan. Ito'y huling paglalaban, magkaisa ng masaklaw ng internasyonal ang sangkatauhan. Wala tayong maasahang bathala o manunubos, kaya't ang ating kaligtas ay nasa ating nationale ang sangkatauhan. Ito'y huling paglalaban, magkaisa lang masaklaw ng internasyonale ang sangkatauhan. Manggagawa at magsasaka, ating partido'y dakila, palayasin ang mga tahanan.